guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am chatting about my tips for iPhone photography. As you guys know, I actually use my digital SLR camera most of the time for most of my photos, but sometimes I forget my memory card or my battery runs out, and also I actually use my iPhone to take all of my videos and stories, videos and photos for my Instagram stories. So whether you're using your phone to capture photos for your feed or you're using it to capture photos or video for your story, I think all of these tips will be really helpful for you. My first tip is really simple and really basic, and it's something you need to do before you even open the camera on your phone, and that is to make sure the lens on your camera is clean. So our phones get chucked in our bags, in our pockets, greasy fingers all over them all day. It can really ruin a photo if there's a mark on your lens, so always make sure you give it a little wipe before you use it. I usually have a little cloth with me either in my sunglasses case or in my camera bag, so either of those are fine, or if you're wearing soft clothing, that can be okay too. The next thing is, and I say this as I'm sitting here recording with the front camera on my phone, but don't use the front camera on your phone for photos that you want to post on your feed or use for higher quality outcomes, because the camera on the back of your phone has a much higher resolution, which means the photos are going to be higher quality, whereas the camera on the front of your phone doesn't. So if you can avoid using it, I would suggest stick to the camera on the back of your phone. First thing you need to do before you even think about taking the photo is to think about the rule of thirds, and a really handy function that you can turn on your iPhone camera is actually the grid. So I will show you how to do that. But basically our eyes like to see things in sort of a grid of thirds rather than exactly in half or exactly symmetrical, because it's just an easier way for our eye to be guided through an image. Whereas when things are cut exactly in half, the whole image is competing for our attention, so we don't know where to rest our eyes. So that is the basic theory around the rule of thirds, and once you turn the grid on your camera, it will actually show you, and you can sort of move your camera around and maybe align the horizon either like at the bottom third or the top third, or if you have vertical things like buildings or trees, you can try and align those on the lines there rather than in the middle. Or even I often position myself on one of the lines of the thirds rather than being right in the middle. To turn on the grid on your camera, go into settings and then scroll down to, scroll to the camera settings, and then there's a little toggle there to turn on the grid. And then when you go into your camera, you can see, and I'm just sitting at my desk right now, there is a grid that you can then line things up to. And then another thing to make sure you do once you've found the framing of your photo and the subject is to use the AEAF lock function on your phone. So this will actually lock the exposure and lock the focus of your image so that you don't get areas that are overexposed. You might notice if you hold your camera up and move around, the light changes in what's showing up on your screen, and some of the lighter areas can often be blown out so they're completely white. So what I like to do is lock my AEAF once I've found that frame, and just pick a sort of mid-tone area in the image and lock it to that. That way your shadows and your highlights aren't too dark or too light. To set the AEAF lock on your camera, basically all you need to do is set up the framing you want and then tap and hold down on the area that you want to be locked. So now our exposure won't change as we move our camera around. So once you've locked the AE/AF, there's another really handy function you can use, which is the exposure slider that shows up next to that little square with a sun icon, and you can actually slide that up and down just to really refine the exposure of the photo that you're going to take. And it's always best to take the photo as you want it, as close as you want it to look in the end, rather than editing in the exposure or editing out the exposure. To use the exposure slider, we can tap anywhere in the frame, and you can see the little sun next to that box. Basically, you just tap on that and slide up or down. You also want to make sure before you take photos, or I basically have this on all the time, is turn on the HDR function. So HDR stands for high dynamic range, and basically what it does is when you take a photo, it actually takes 3 photos of exactly the same image, one that's underexposed, one that's exposed well, and one that is overexposed, and then it maps those together so that the light areas showing and the dark areas are showing, and nothing's over or underexposed. To turn your HDR on or off, basically all you do is go up to the top left-hand corner and click HDR. Then you have the options of turning it off, turning it on, having it on auto. And for anyone who knows me well, you will know that I really don't like using flash on a camera, and I actually cringe when people turn their flash on. I think turn your flash off, basically don't use it unless it's for a special kind of circumstance where it's going to help your photo, but generally just find good lighting. Good natural lighting, you can't beat it when it comes to photography and the quality of your photo, especially when you're using a phone, because you're already, I guess, a step behind using an SLR or a camera that shoots in RAW. You've got less to work with once you've taken the image. So good natural lighting will help you get a better quality photo. And when I talk about good natural lighting, what I mean is generally softer lighting, so early in the morning, later in the evening, not in midday sun where you've got really harsh shadows. And that's just a general rule of thumb. I think it's fun to experiment with these things, and you can get really nice photos in the middle of the day, but it's probably, if you're just starting out, I would recommend getting used to working with good lighting before you start pushing the boundaries and working with harsher lighting. To turn your flash off, you go to the top left-hand corner, there's a little lightning symbol, you click that, and you can click off, on, or auto. If you are by yourself or traveling solo, a really handy function is the self-timer mode. So you can set it to, I think it's 1, 3, and 10 seconds. I'll show you in a minute. But basically, if you can prop your phone up somewhere and set the photo up, put your self-timer on, 10 seconds is really good if you need to get sort of a decent distance from your phone. And then you tap the shutter button and run to your position, and it will take the photo with a 10-second countdown, or whichever option you choose. This is actually also a really handy function if you want a super clean, crisp image with 0 blur, because what happens when you take a photo with the shutter button, you might move the phone a little bit as you press it, so particularly good in low lighting situations where the camera needs to be really still. To use your self-timer mode, there's a little clock symbol in the top right-hand corner, so you click that, and then you can choose either 3 seconds or 10 seconds. So if I pick 3 seconds, and then I click my shutter button, the phone then counts down and takes a photo after 3 seconds. One of my favorite modes for twirling or running or any kind of action shots I do is burst mode, and basically that works just by holding down the shutter button, and your phone will just take a continuous loop of photos, and then it will save it in your camera roll as a little sort of collection of photos. Then you can go into that and pick the ones that you like the most and discard the rest. But it's super handy just for capturing that perfect mid-twirl moment that you guys know I love. To use burst mode, Once you've set your photo up, then you just hold down the shutter button and it will take as many photos until you stop holding the shutter button down. I mentioned using self-timer mode to avoid blurry photos, but another good way to do this is to actually use the volume button as your shutter button rather than the little touch button on your screen, because your screen is so light that when you go to touch it, it's easy to push your phone at the same time and create a bit of blur, whereas the button, the volume buttons on the side, the left hand side of your phone, are actually real buttons, so it feels more like a real camera and you just tend to be a bit more sturdy when you use those ones. And my final tip, which you have heard before, is use third-party editing apps. Don't edit in the camera app itself. It's not the best tool for doing so, and there are some amazing ones out there. You guys already know that Lightroom Mobile is my favorite editing app, but some other good ones are also Visco and Snapseed. So really just play around with different apps and find what you're most comfortable with and find what it will help you achieve the look you're after best with. But yeah, Lightroom's the best option in regards to having the most flexibility around editing specific colors in your photo. And I have posted photos that I've taken with my iPhone and edited on the Lightroom mobile app that have performed better than photos I've taken with my digital SLR and edited on my desktop. So it's a very powerful set of tools that you can use. You don't need a professional camera, you don't need super fancy software to create beautiful photos. So they are all of my basic tips when it comes to iPhone photography, and I hope they've been really helpful. As always, if you have any comments or any questions, please leave them down below. Please double tap and give this video a like, and if you have any more requests for future IGTV episodes, please DM me and let me know what you'd like to have a chat with me about. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye!